In the former empire of Genghis Khan, the nation of Mongolia is a less visited corner of the globe. But since I was here for the United Inaugural, I figured the best way to leave the country was on their flag carrier, MIAT Mongolian Airlines. We covered MIAT's business class on their 767s a couple years ago, but I figured I was overdue for a return considering they completely refreshed their fleet and are closer than ever to launching the first ever non-stop flights between the United States and Mongolia. Plus, this airline is cheap. So for only about $1,000, we can see what kind of product is delivered. Join me on this business class journey from Ulaanbaatar to Frankfurt, Germany in business class of their 787 while we also discuss the country's history and when we may see them in the US soon, all in the timestamps below. MIAT's hub is the Genghis Khan International Airport, which is unfortunately about an hour from the city. This airport was opened in 2021 as the previous airport, closer to the city, was next to a bunch of mountains, making only one end of the runway usable, leading to unfavorable winds and adverse weather causing frequent diversions. Working with Japan, Mongolia began planning the airport in 2006, breaking ground on the airport and highway in 2012, supposed to open in 2016, then 2017, 18, 19, 20, and finally 2021, largely due to delays in the highway's construction and then the pandemic. Then it was given the Genghis Khan name from the old airport and had its first flight to Tokyo on July 4th, now with Seoul as their biggest destination. Check-in is split into two sections, but MIAT runs the entire A section. Check-in doesn't open until 3 hours before departure, so don't worry about getting here too early. But once it does open, they separate the lines by destinations, with business class getting its own lane. When we were here in 2023, we covered the business class lane on the far left, which was great as you fed directly into the lounge off to the side. At this point, this lounge is only a contract lounge for non-Mongolian carriers, or seemingly pay-to-use. The unfortunate bit is that lounge was nice, but it also had its own security checkpoint in the back, and they took care of outbound immigration for you while you relaxed, so there was absolutely no waiting when you left for your gate. Instead, we got our ticket and got in line for the main security and immigration. Not only do we not have that lounge experience, but there wasn't even priority lanes for security or immigration unless you're a diplomat. Major downgrade from last time. The terminal's actually a great space considering the low capacity. A lot of countries with small aviation markets have rundown terminals, but Ulaanbaatar has a gorgeous looking terminal with great shops and tons of natural light and views. I admired the 767 that we flew to Frankfurt last time, that would be going to Seoul today, before heading to the new MIAT lounge that wasn't open last time I was here, so I was very excited to see what they built as a flagship space for themselves. To the far right, next to Gate 1 and the United signs that live here now, is the basically new MIAT Blue Sky Lounge. It looks like this lounge opened just after I flew them last time, but the check-in area looks great. Unfortunately, the lounge is small. I mean, there's only about 30 seats in here, and with 2 wide-body flights in the next hour, it got packed. I'm assuming it's fairly empty for almost all other times of the day. It does look nice, however, with new furnishings, simple art on the wall, and modern light fixtures to help with the sparsely provided windows. If you can find a window, the views aren't bad as they see the corner of the ramp and also the runway. They do have a buffet, but it's kind of strange. The center island is mostly tea and tea snacks. Around the edge is coffees and beverages, with the only foods being cereal and cup of noodles. Then there's a cooler with more substantial items. The idea is to take one of the cartons and put it in the microwave. They had an attendant to help, but it got super cramped in here. To be honest, it's one of the stranger lounge spreads I've seen offered. The other thing that's odd is that this lounge is basically sponsored by alcohol. The pillows are branded with the Genghis Khan vodka, plus a large display of vodka that I didn't get footage of as people were sitting right in front of it and facing me. Then the whole buffet area has the Alton Gobi beer advertisements and a whole fridge of just beer. The good thing is that once boarding came around, we just had to walk to the gate. I'm still bummed to see MIAT with this new lounge strategy. In my opinion, the old lounge was much better. It had more space, more privacy, better food options, but the best part was that they took care of the immigration and security. I'd still choose that over this any day. From the lounge window, I watched as our 787 was towed in from a remote stand as it arrived last night from South Korea. In August 2023, MIAT received their first 787. They not only modernized long-haul travel with it, but had twice as many business class seats as the 767 and 40 more in total. In June 2024, they announced they plan to double their 787 fleet from 2 to 4 in order to reach the US, as they also desire services to Sydney and Singapore on top of Frankfurt and Istanbul seen presently. This 787 is one of 2 they have on lease, being just over 6 years old and previously operating in China before coming to Mongolia. Over at Gate 6, they were preparing to board. MIAT ordered everyone to line up in a few lines separated by rows. Business class boarded first as we made our way down the jetway to board the 6-year-old Dreamliner that's only been with MIAT for about a year. Considering their 767s had the outdated interiors, I was excited to see what was on board this thing. Welcome to the 121 cabin that has put MIAT's business class hard product standard with the rest of the world. The reverse herringbone seats are fairly basic, and the lack of color makes the cabin kinda boring, but it's a large improvement from the previous product. At least now all seats are equal and have direct aisle access, although the seat numbers start at 11 oddly enough. I'm in seat 12A, which is in the second row. The seat has the MIAT protective cover, and the seat itself's relatively wide. Along the aisle, the seat's fairly open, so it's good to have a small partition for sleep or an armrest while awake, plus the cubby that can fit all your chargers and amenities. The other side of the seat has the regular counter and plugs. There's the reading light and a great touchscreen remote next to the seat controls, plugs, and a cubby that really only works for the headset. The counter's kinda small, but the tray table is also small, so together they kinda make one good-sized counter, kinda like Vietnam Airlines, and then a tiny storage area below it, like Avianca. In front of you is the TV that comes out with this button that was kinda stuck. The footwell's a really good size, mostly because there's no leg rest, but there is storage below it that's wide but not too deep, pretty much just for shoes, and unfortunately, no air vents. For amenities, I took an orange juice instead of apple or water because there was a water bottle at the seat already. We got the bedding, which was just a pillow and blanket, and both of which look kinda sad and like what most carriers give you in economy. It's new since my last flight with MIAT, but it's the same quality. Maybe it's better on the overnight flights, but I have my doubts. Then the amenity kit, which has also been refreshed. Unfortunately, I think they've gotten worse as well. It's basic with the stuff you'd expect, plus the slippers folded in half jammed in there, and there's seemingly Arabic amenities, which seems odd. But there is a real hairbrush. Here's what they had before, however. It included things like mouthwash and really nice L'Occitane amenities. MIAT shocked the world when they ordered 787s and announced that they would be used for US service. Their intended destination remained a mystery until February 2023 when they announced that San Francisco would be their choice. Currently, MIAT only has approval for code sharing and wet leasing, but still needs the rights to bring their own aircraft. Code sharing with Turkish and Cathay are carrying the most people, with Turkish allowing for connections to 10 destinations in Europe and the US, but much more connecting on Cathay's Hong Kong to San Francisco flights. San Francisco's Mongolian population sits near 10,000. Mongolians also often come to the US for higher education, with most of them in Bay Area universities. Plus, San Francisco is home to a busy Mongolian consulate. Last year, 64,000 people flew between the Mongolia and the US, with San Francisco being the top destination, with a high proportion of diplomats, which does help with premium capacity. Even still, it only saw 27 people per day on the route. Since the flight will serve diplomats most frequently, I'd see it flying twice weekly to best align with the work week. And if they can grow their Asian connections, it could serve as a great hub for connecting passengers, especially considering MIAT has by far the cheapest connecting journeys on their Frankfurt and Istanbul routes to Asia. So you'd have to believe that SFO would have the same thing, something that doesn't exist in business class besides Philippine Airlines, which is far worse. To help with this route's execution, the US and Mongolia signed an Open Skies agreement in 2023, which allows the two countries more freedom in route announcements. This explains how United was able to launch their new Ulaanbaatar flight, whose inaugural we covered. At the moment, there appears to be 2 major hurdles left before MIAT can launch their expected San Francisco flights. First, they still need that foreign air carrier certificate. They have authorization to code share on US flights and operate wet leased flights, but the last agreement I can find explicitly says that they cannot operate flights with their own aircraft and crew. The bigger hurdle is the FAA Category 1 certification. The FAA has a list of standards to be met for the country to be given its certification. A country needs this for their airlines to add new services to the US. It can take 5 or more years to get, but they have already been working on it apparently. But when they do finally announce that San Francisco flight, I can guarantee you guys that I'll be there. Unfortunately, no city views on this side of the aircraft, but you can see a bit of Ulaanbaatar from my last departure here. Since the airport's kind of far, it's not the closest view, but with the hills, it's still a great view. Then they prepared for our first meal. There wasn't any menus handed out, they just came through the aisle with carts and gave us the 2 options for each meal. After the hot towels were passed out, they took drink orders. A 10 a.m. departure felt like the best time to have some of that Alton Gobi beer. But to even it out, I also took a sparkling water and the small packet of pine nuts, which are everywhere in Ulaanbaatar. After passing some beautiful snow-capped Russian mountains, it was time for the main meal, which came out all on one tray. We were given the choice of fish or sheep. It's not every day you have sheep as an option, so that's what I opted for. It came with roasted veggies and rice alongside a sad little cucumber, tomato, parsley salad and some bread. I have to keep reminding myself how cheap this ticket was because this meal is definitely weaker than most economy meals even. Honestly, like the lounge, this is another area I feel MIAT has downgraded. When I flew last time, it looked like they took care in their meals. Crackers with roe, folded salami and cheese. I did like their silverware, but with the gold ring and MIAT logo, it had begun to worn off, which is why the carved logo is always best. After they collected the meals, the carts appeared once more with the desserts, and tea or coffee. I chose the coffee, and then a lemon cake over the fruit option. Then it was time to set up the bed. I actually found the seat to be a good width, and it's new enough that it's pretty comfortable. That's a good thing, because the bedding is bleak. The pillow is pretty small, and the blanket, even though the design is nice, is also small. I found that if I pulled it up, my feet would stick out the bottom, and it was thin. But there was no air vent, so it kinda worked out. That being said, it's got a ton of space in the footwell to sleep how you'd like, although the privacy of these reverse herringbone seats is never all that good on any carrier. With the seat being super comfortable, if they can beef up the bedding, this could make a great bed. As it is, you've got economy class bedding on a business class bed. As with most 787s, the crew lowered the window dimmers, but fortunately they didn't lock them like most carriers. Some 787 business class lavatories have nice finishings or even a window, but these are kind of basic lavatories that don't have any amenities in the holders here. But I do wonder what happened to warrant this much of a caution not to flush things. Browsing the entertainment, MIAT has an interesting spread of movies. Some newer titles, but mostly random movies from the last 10 to 20 years, and keep in mind that they aren't all in English. The TV shows are slim, with only a few comedies and just a few episodes from each. They do have my favorite map with info on different world cities and landmarks if you're looking for a lesson, and you can view it on the handset while watching a show, basically as a second screen. They do have a Wi-Fi connection, but it doesn't seem to offer internet. It does have additional entertainment options, however, if you'd prefer to use your personal device. But for the seatback TVs, you'll notice that there weren't headphones when we discussed the amenities. On request, however, you can get these noise-canceling headphones that were actually one of the better sets out there. Just interesting to have to ask. Exactly 3 hours before arrival, they prepped for our final meal. The timing seemed a bit strange, as the flight's only about 9 hours and it's only been about 4 hours since we wrapped up the last meal. Maybe they wanted to secure the cabin early, but it just seemed a bit early for that second meal. As I'd already had the Mongolian beer and coffee, I just got a Coke for this meal. Then the carts appeared and we were offered beef or chicken. I chose the beef option, which was served with a cream sauce and mushrooms, mashed potatoes, and more grilled veggies. I got the brown bread this time, and then we got the same salad thing, which I almost don't feel like calling a salad. Right as I was about to dig in, however, I noticed the mold. In all my travels, this is somehow the first time I've ever noticed mold on my food. I don't care if you're Emirates or Spirit Airlines, mold on the food you're serving is unacceptable. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen. I know the food was weak on this flight, but for how cheap the flight was, I was totally willing to accept it. But not even a free meal should be moldy. So I kinda lost my appetite when I saw that and opted for the fruit cup for dessert as the only thing I ate for this final meal. The state-owned national carrier of Mongolia began in 1925 when the USSR gave one Junkers aircraft to the country. Mongolia's Civil Air Transport Department launched with 8 aircraft to serve just domestic routes from Ulaanbaatar with no regular services, just charter and mail. In order to start regular services, the country sent crews to Russia for training in 1955, and then the next year, Mongolian Airlines flew for the first time from Ulaanbaatar to Irkutsk, racking up a fleet of Soviet aircraft and serving 130 airfields, mostly domestic throughout provincial capitals. Their first regular international operations began in 1987 to Moscow, Irkutsk, and Beijing, with their first ever jet, the Tupolev 154 leased from Aeroflot. After the communist era, MIAT bought Chinese aircraft for their domestic flights and were given 727s from Korean Air's parent company in '92, and the following year MIAT became an independent state-owned airline, which it remains to this day. In '95, MIAT began their first non-Soviet or Chinese route to Seoul, with Berlin and Osaka the next year. Overall, however, the '90s were a tough stretch for MIAT as they recorded 4 fatal crashes, so to help regain their image, they refreshed the fleet by leasing 737s to replace the aging Soviet fleets and 767s to replace the A310s in 2011. They even ordered their first new aircraft, including more 737s and 767s that year, as they became 100% Boeing, even surprising the world by announcing they'd not only be leasing a 787, but they would fly to San Francisco in 2021. The pandemic put a damper on MIAT's refresh as orders and routes were delayed, although repatriation flights for Mongolian citizens brought the first ever nonstop flights from Mongolia to North America, Oceania, and Africa, with Seattle, Sydney, and Joburg respectively. To grow tourism as they came out of COVID, they resumed domestic operations for the first time in 15 years and wet-leased aircraft to allow more connections in Ulaanbaatar, as they also received the 787s finally in 2023, placing them on existing long-haul routes while waiting for U.S. certification. Ever since MIAT ordered their 787s and planned U.S. services, they've looked at joining an alliance as well. Even still, MIAT isn't in a major alliance, only maintaining partnerships with Aeroflot, Turkish, and Cathay. In 2023, the CEO said they were looking to join One World Alliance, though the One World Connect program allows small carriers to work with an alliance, but not as a full carrier. Airlines have to be sponsored into the program by a full alliance carrier. One World Elite members can use priority check-in and boarding, but only elite members of the sponsor airline can earn and redeem points and get lounge access. Currently, Fiji Airways is the only example of this program. Despite this, Star Alliance seems to make more sense considering they already fly to Frankfurt and Istanbul, the 2 most diverse Star Alliance hubs in the world, and they announced San Francisco is their US plan, which is also a major Star Alliance hub. Even SkyTeam could make sense as Seoul is their busiest destination and has Korean Air, but I just don't get the One World thing except that the Connect program is the easiest path into an alliance. They do partner with JAL in Tokyo and Cathay in Hong Kong, but those destinations see less than 100,000 people annually. Last year, however, MIAT recorded a 25% increase in passengers with a rising, but still small amount of transferring people, as MIAT still relies almost entirely on point-to-point passengers. All said and done, it will be interesting to see how MIAT grows from here, especially if they can get to the US, and how that will evolve the airline and the connections throughout Asia. Arriving to Frankfurt's Terminal 2 feels strange considering that most of the time when I'm here, I'm with Star Alliance. I was excited to fly with MIAT for two main reasons. First, I was hyped to be back in Mongolia, but also because I wanted to see their new product on the 787. Summarizing it, I'd say that the hard product is a noticeable improvement to the market standard, but only the hard product. I actually think the soft product got worse. Starting at the airport, I do really like the Ulaanbaatar airport. It's bright and clean, a real good place to start a journey. I just can't get over the lounge thing. I mean, I feel like they struck gold on the old lounge with how easy it made the airport experience. I get that they wanted lounge space of their own, but it's such a downgrade in my opinion. No more airport priority, and the lounge is like less than half the size. On board, I was initially impressed by the cabin. Don't get me wrong, it's a boring cabin. They need some more color to make it pop, but I just appreciate that they made it a modern product. Great for making them competitive in Europe, and especially if they do expand to Sydney, Singapore, and the US, as they plan to. Other than that, however, the flight was remarkably unremarkable. The amenity kit used to have known luxury brands, and now they've got cheap basics. Headsets were only given when I asked for them, but there's no reason they can't be at the seat waiting for us. The food used to appear with more care, now it's also basic, and still with no menus. The mold is a whole different level though. The chain of operations has to be so broken for something like this to even happen, let alone get served to passengers. The bedding is about the only thing that was the same as last time. Unfortunately, that's because it was underwhelming then, and underwhelming now. As I see it, MIAT's business class should be judged like an economy ticket with a lie-flat seat. Compared to most carriers, the soft product resembles an economy quality experience. But to be fair, it's kinda priced like that. I mean, the ticket from Frankfurt to Ulaanbaatar in business class is roughly $1,100. For contrast, there's plenty of airlines operating from East Asia to Frankfurt. Economy is around $400 each way, but business will run you over $2,000 easily. So if you consider it's about half the price to fly MIAT's business class, I'll take it. I mean, as long as you know that you're getting what you paid for, you can bring stuff with you to supplement your needs. Other than the food, gotta fix that, but the pricing is also why I believe MIAT can find success in the US markets if they launch. Sure, there may not be a huge market of people going from San Francisco to Ulaanbaatar, but San Francisco has some of the highest concentration of travelers to and from Asia. If people are given a dirt cheap, one-stop flight option with MIAT, they'll take it. While we can judge products all day long, the cheapest ticket always wins regardless. But share your thoughts on MIAT below, and until next Sunday, safe travels. I'll see y'all next time.